few years ago, I had it all. I had the job, I had the money, I had the boss that loved me, I had the influence, I had the friends, I had it all. And I was wetting the bed at night because I was so stressed. And I knew that something was deeply, deeply wrong. I spent my whole life building an identity and a life around things that I thought I should do. I grew up Mormon and I stayed active because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I made friends with certain people because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I lived a certain way because I thought that was the right thing to do. I stayed in a corporate career that I always knew I didn't want because it felt like the right thing to do. And I was under the belief that, one day everything would just kind of fit for me. Everything would just kind of work. And it just never did. Nothing ever ended up fitting with me. The religion started not fitting. I started having panic attacks because I was felt like I just didn't belong in the religion because it wasn't right for me. It didn't align with who I am, what I wanted, none of that. And so I left. And I thought that that was the beginning. And then my job started to kind of flash at me and say, you can't be in this career anymore. I started seeing friendships more clearly, and maybe I was too harsh, but they didn't work for me anymore. My worldview, my identity, everything looked good on the outside, especially in my career. I was making over 120K. I was remote. I had a boss who loved me. I was employee number one. I had influence, power, flexibility, and I hated my life more than when I was working as a shift worker, as a lifeguard. I hated it. I hated my life. I was so deeply, deeply miserable because everything on the outside looked good, but on the inside, I was drowning. Nothing felt right. I would say all the time, you know, I feel like my life hasn't even begun. I don't feel like this is my life. I don't even feel like my life belongs to me anymore. And so at this time in 2024, a few years ago, I was just really starting to look at things and I was really afraid because I had no idea what I wanted to fill all of this up. People would tell me, don't run from something, run towards something. And I was trying really hard to listen to that. But then I had a friend who took her life in the summer of 2024. And when she died, it didn't make sense to anybody. None of us. She had been really struggling with depression, and we knew that. But on the outside, her life looked good. She had gotten married that year to a man that was obsessed with her. They were wanting to have a baby. She had moved to the Netherlands to pursue being a chocolatier because that was a dream of hers. And on the outside, things looked good. But I believe that she was just so deeply unhappy because she was living a life that wasn't hers. She was living a life that she felt like she should. And she was living the life that didn't really belong to her. Maybe, I don't know if she wanted to get married. I don't know if she wanted to have kids. I don't know if she was happy being a chocolatier anymore. I know that that job didn't work for her, but when she died, I kind of saw my path in life. I saw that, okay, if I continue to live a life and make decisions around things that I think I should do about who I should be, this is how my story will end. I will end this same way, and this will be the end of it. And it really became a catalyst for me to realize how close I was to ending my life that way instead of ending my life in my 80s, having a premature death. And the anniversary is coming up in a couple weeks. And when she died, I just decided I can't live in fear of things not working out anymore. I can't live waiting for somebody to save me. Nobody is coming to save me. I have to do it myself. And it was so ground shaking because also at the time, my family wasn't reaching out to me to see how I was doing with my friend's death. My friends didn't reach out to me. I was very isolated and alone. And my work was understanding to a point, but everybody still has deadlines. They don't care that you're on the other side of the world with your friend's family and her husband's family, and you're mourning a death of someone that you loved, and your whole world is being shaken apart. And I just realized that this just wasn't working for me anymore. The life that I was living, everything about it wasn't working. The identity that I had in my mind, the friends that I had, it wasn't what I wanted because no one was showing up for me. Yet people were showing up for her family and for her husband's family that they hadn't seen in probably a decade. And now a lot of people didn't know I was going through this, but it was so apparent to me to see, oh my gosh, the life that I have lived and the life that I've built, it doesn't support me when I'm in a crisis, and it doesn't edify me. I still need to make deadlines. I still need to do these things. I don't want to live that way anymore. And I started to realize that so many things about my life just were not working. And I realized that life was too precious and life is too short to keep living a life that felt wrong, because I didn't feel like I was living my life. I felt I was living someone else's life. But the sad thing is I had become so good at living a life that I thought what I should live that I'd forgotten the life that I actually wanted to live. And so I went through a huge phase, and it started with my job. Um, a few months after she died, I really realized that the job I was working, it didn't work for me. I became ruthless in cutting things out of my life. I cut this job out of my life with no backup plan. I removed friendships in a very rigid, sometimes harsh way. I walked away from being a bridesmaid in someone's wedding. I let go of friends who didn't show up for me during the time that I needed them. I removed identities. I removed all of these things. And I went through these different cycles where for about a year, I would see something wasn't working, I would cut it out, and then I would withdraw. And I would continue that cycle over and over and over and over again because I didn't know at the time where I was going, but I knew what was not working for me anymore. And that was becoming so clear to me, and I couldn't ignore it because ignoring it was literally making me wet the bed. It was literally killing me. I was having insane blood work results show up. I had crazy blood sugar spikes. I wasn't sleeping. I was waking up in the middle of the night, probably 3 or 4 times. I was anxious to the point that I couldn't keep food down some nights. And I was wetting the bed as a grown woman because I was so stressed. And my body knew that the life that I was living was in such misalignment with the life that I knew I was meant for. And what I started to do is I started to say, okay, this doesn't work for me anymore. This doesn't fit anymore, but I don't know what will fit. And so, in order to see what was clear for me, I knew I needed to leave things behind. So I left my job. I became really ruthless. I left friendships. I moved an apartment. I just removed all the things that I could start seeing were not working for me. And I didn't make these decisions from a state of expansion. I was deep in survival. And when you're in survival, it becomes a yes or a no, black and white thing. There's no nuance. And so even with the friendships that I left behind, I didn't allow any room for nuance. I was very black and white about things. And with my job, I could have tried to figure out things, but I had to look at it, and I chose to choose my life and my health over living with the complications of nuance, because that's just not where I was at the time. And I was really focused on what I was protecting myself from. And I became really focused on getting rid of all these things so that there could be space for me to listen to myself. Because at the time, I couldn't hear myself. I couldn't hear what I wanted, because all these external voices were giving me advice, were telling me what they wanted from me, who they wanted me to be, the friends, who they wanted me to be, how they wanted me to show up, my job, who it wanted me to be, how it wanted me to show up, relationships, my family, all of it. I went through a period where I stopped talking to my mom for about a year because her influence in my life was so overwhelming that I couldn't focus on what I needed, because I was so focused on making sure that she was okay. I couldn't talk to my brothers. I couldn't talk to anybody. I became so isolated, but it was really, really intentional, because nothing could stay that was not working for me anymore. And so I just kept repeating this cycle. And I even grew a very small TikTok following of about, I think it was like maybe 2,000 followers, but it was something. And I worked really hard at it, and I posted regularly. I had a couple videos go viral. And I was trying really hard to build this audience, because as I started narrowing things out and started cutting out other opinions and started listening to myself, I knew I wanted something that was expansive, and I wanted to give myself freedom, and I wanted to give myself opportunities. And I also knew deep down that I wanted to be a voice for people to listen to. I wanted to be relatable. I wanted to post. I wanted to be accessible. I wanted to share my story. And so I was posting on TikTok, and it became really obvious after a few months that it just wasn't working. Not because I wasn't gaining the following, I was, but because my body was telling me that it was time for me to let that go and to go deep into what I called the cocoon, because I needed not only the life outside of me to dissolve, I needed my internal structure to also dissolve, because I realized that the person that I was, I couldn't bring her with me on the path of who I was becoming. And I needed her. I needed to say goodbye to her. And so I put TikTok aside. I put working out aside. I put fashion and trying to build aside, because I realized that the foundation that I was building my life on, it was still shaky. And I still needed to remove other things before I could start climbing these mountains. And so I left it behind, and I withdrew for about, stopped doing TikTok, I think in July of 2025 or August. And so for about 6 months, I withdrew, and I cried every day. I smoked a lot of weed and I cried and I grieved and I did therapy, and it didn't really help. But I became a person of solitude. I started writing down my ideas. I created a note. Well, really, I created a folder on my phone called The Cocoon. And I just started making notes about things that I had ideas of, about the life that I kind of wanted. And over time, the vision became clearer and clearer and clearer. And I started to reach what I call the plateau. I even drew a picture of it for you right here. So the way I think of it is that this is me, or this is you. And I dug this hole for my life because this is what I thought I should be doing. And I created a life down here. It was beautiful. But these mountains, the mountains of success or the mountains of actualization, the mountains of who I wanted to be, what I was doing, I couldn't see them from down here. It was, my view was blocked. But I knew that there was something there. I knew that there was something that I could vaguely remember as a child before I started digging this hole and this life, which was, I want a life of impact. I want to write, I want to speak, I want to be a vision, I want to have a healthy body, I want to feel sexy. And I lost all of that in here because I wasn't living from my ideas, I was living from who I thought I should be. And so over time, I climbed out and it gave me strength. But this ladder, this is where I left things behind. I couldn't take things with me, they were too heavy for me to carry. And I probably let go of things that I didn't need to. I regret some of I regret some of the ways I handled friendships. I regret some of the ways that I handled my career. I regret a lot of that, actually. But what I don't regret is removing myself from those situations, because it got me here to this base camp. That's my little fire and my little my little tent. And you can see the mountains too. And so you come up here to the base camp, and I realized that I didn't need to have a new vision. I just needed to remember that there were mountains in my life. I needed to clear away everything that was blocking my vision for the life that I wanted. And I didn't know what that vision would be. And I didn't even know if the vision existed. I just knew that what was happening for me was going to kill me because of what happened with my friend. I couldn't continue. I couldn't continue the way that I had been going. I just couldn't. And so now in February, I hit a point where February 2026, it's now June 2026, but in February, I had these really big ideas. I had ideas to start a business around ceramics. I had an idea to start astrology informed coaching, and I'm doing it now. And I kind of said a prayer, because while I left a church, I didn't lose a faith in God. And I don't even know what that is. If I'm honest, I don't really even know what my identity with religion or with God is. I don't really know where I fit with that. But I do believe in the power of prayer because I've had experiences with it. And I remember praying to remove all things that were preventing me from being the person I needed to be. And within that week, I was blamed and lied to by a friend for something that was so trivial. And I realized that I couldn't keep her in my life, because I realized I needed to have friends in my life that I trusted and that didn't make me feel small and didn't blame me for things that they've done. I will not accept that behavior from people. And so I unfortunately removed her from my life. And within the same month, I had a leak that had been a problem in my apartment for a while become very obvious to, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It became too much of a problem. And so I moved, and I'm now here in this apartment, and it's smaller and I have more roommates, and it's safe and small and cozy. And I don't have what I want in my life. There's days where I feel very lost and confused and a lot of grief about the choices that I made, and the grief of the lost time from surviving and from digging a hole in my life, and from the things that came in that were not really even my choice, the pain that people created for me. Because this hole, as much as it created pain, it was a refuge for a lot of things. It was, well, this is what I can control. I couldn't control the way that people saw me. I couldn't really control my dating life, my friendships. I couldn't control my career in some ways. I felt so trapped, but I could dig this hole and I could do it. And so now I'm working through all of this grief that I feel, all this pain, because I'm 31. I turn 32 next month. And I'm looking at my life and I'm thinking, gosh, I really wish I had done things differently. And I'm really sad that I didn't, but I didn't know. I didn't know that the mountains existed. I had forgotten. I didn't remember who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what I needed to become. And I was so scared. And I am so grateful that I let all these things go, because even though I don't have nearly anything that I want yet, for the first time in my life, I really do feel like I'm building a life that is mine. From my sense of direction, I'm posting on YouTube, I'm coaching people, I'm writing, I'm thinking, I'm nannying. I walked away from my high paying corporate job and now I'm a nanny and I work part time. I'm not trying to rebuild my body in any fancy way. I'm just trying to stabilize it right now. I'm doing physical therapy. I'm focusing on posture. I'm focusing on my core. And it's very slow, but it's mine. And I finally, for the first time in my life, know what I'm walking towards. And if this resonated with you, I want you to stay. And I hope you subscribe. And I hope we can do this journey together, because you're not alone and we can do it. Toodles.